Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, put your hands together for the one, the only.
Five Nights at Freddy's has been around for over 1/3 of my life. That's weird to think about. Something even weirder is that this game and this game are a part of the same franchise. Seriously, compare the two for a second. FNAF 1 to Security Breach. If you look hard enough, you start to realize that the only thing recognizable between the two are the original cast of characters. Freddy, Chica, Foxy, and Bonnie. Yeah. Once Security Breach was finally released, I got interested in just how we got from here to here, and how one man can make two games so radically different in the same series. So, let's do that. I was never good at transitions. Let's just start, okay? First, it's important to understand one thing and one thing only. Scott Cawthon is a weird guy. That's not a bad thing, but it does tell us a lot about Five Nights at Freddy's as a series. Scott was born in Houston, Texas on June 4th, 1978. His career into games and animation began in the late 1990s, in a time where technology in that field was a far cry from where it is today. Outside of the most cutting-edge technology at the time and hundreds of millions in animation budget, 3D animations of the era looked something more like this. Movement was stiff, textures were simple, and models were made of a few basic shapes and nothing much more. But 3D animation wasn't alone in the 90s, at least not in terms of its jankiness. Also lying in the dark tendrils of the world before Y2K was a little craze you might recognize, a pizza place by the name of Chuck E. Cheese. Now, low-level conspiracies about reusing pizza slices aside, the craze around these animatronic restaurants cannot be understated. And when a place is so universal as Chuck E. Cheese was, it can start to leave something in the minds of those who entered it. A sort of liminality, a kind that mixes foggy childhood memories with the awkward, uncanny style of the time. As Scott's career continued, his work and his faith began to intertwine. He joined a company named Hope Animation in the early 2000s, and with them created an 8-part animated series on a famous Christian allegory, The Pilgrim's Progress. And I have to say, it is pretty in line with the 2000s Christian animated series, to be honest with you.
What must I do to be saved?
Following the release of the final part, Scott went on to create an impressive number of games on his own. Many are difficult to find, with only scraps of their existence still on the internet, but just checking the names, we can get some insight into Scott's personality. Among some early Flash game era sounding ones like Rage Quit or Forever Quester, we have more telling games like Fart Hotel, alright? We also have Bad Tip Waiter Calculator, Pogo Duck, a truly concerning amount of slot machine games, and Pimp My Dungeon. If we check out some of his more iconic games, however, a bit of a pattern starts to arise. The Desolate Hope is one of Scott Cawthon's biggest projects. The game explores a rotting world filled with nothing but machines, once originally designed to simulate off-world expansion. However, the robots stopped getting updates from their humans over 30 years ago. You play as Coffee, a fittingly named coffee pot, as he tries to fight off computer viruses that are taking over the massive derelict machines keeping their isolated station running. The world is intentionally ugly, any movement is jagged, any living being is artificial, and it's also surreal and familiar. It's like the game itself is stuck in the 1990s, still captured by that animatronic craze. This fixation seemed to bleed into much of his other work. Whether he never learned the more modern animation styles or he simply liked the old look more, Scott's games were permanently stuck in the past, stuck in that feeling of the uncanny. While the few who played the game seemed to love it, The Desolate Hope was not the success Scott was hoping for it to be. He released it initially for free on his website in the April of 2012, and finally managed to get it on Steam a few years later, where it received 15 reviews in 4 months. His release of Chipper & Sons Lumber Co. just 1 year after The Desolate Hope shows much of the same look and tone, even if unintentional. While the game itself is a quirky farming sim, the style that made The Desolate Hope so interesting is the same one that made this game a horrible failure. Critics of the game when it was trying to pass Steam Greenlight were incredibly cruel, touting the animation and style as mechanical and creepy. Chipper & Sons released in late 2013, after a long career of trying to break through as an independent developer. Scott's fascination with the 90s animation style seemed to hold him back, with nearly every attempt at a big project being alienated and thwarted by it. At this point, any normal person would have given up. But Scott Cawthon is not normal. Seeing the reviews for Chipper & Sons, creepy, mechanical, horrific, would make anyone depressed. And yet, facing his style for what it truly is, Scott made a decision. He'd give the world something to really be scared of. It's easy to forget just how strange the first Five Nights at Freddy's game really is. The horror game industry, from indie devs to AAA studios, centered around the idea that the player needs to do something. If you turn a corner and see a long, dark hallway, it was on the person to actually step towards it. While this is still the tried and true formula and is perfectly scary in its own right, FNAF's approach to horror is much more interesting to me. Taking influences from his own past work, Five Nights at Freddy's is what I'd like to call a sit-and-survive horror game. Rather than the horror coming from being forced to make decisions, Five Nights at Freddy's makes it clear that you are absolutely helpless. The goal of the game is to run out the clock. That is really all you can do. While you sit in the office, a whole team of coordinated animatronics slowly or very, very quickly approach you, giving razor-thin margins to actually stop them from entering. It gets even more stressful with the power system, forcing you to keep yourself exposed, otherwise you are absolutely guaranteed to die. The entire game hinges on a balance of keeping everything open until the moment you need to close them. It might seem weird nowadays that FNAF 1 was a brand new kind of horror game, but that's what a lot of its appeal was. I remember my older brother telling me about the game as a kid, calling it a horror game where, quote, the monsters come to you. Even Markiplier's now iconic FNAF 1 playthrough description reads, no other game has given me a greater feeling of dread than this one. Five Nights at Freddy's is incredibly unique and takes an approach to horror that I've never experienced before. That's high praise from someone who built a following playing horror games. However weird it may be, though, in terms of tone, the first game is deadly serious. Darkness is spread entirely throughout the pizzeria, making the corners of every room near invisible. You're only allowed cursory glances at each and every room between managing the animatronics and your power, letting your mind wander as to what you might have missed. The poor static on the camera makes you paranoid, giving you glimpses of things that aren't even there, until you finally see a real, genuine change. One of the animatronics just moved. Due to the limitations and budget of the game, nearly all movement is obscured by cameras dying out. Almost like weeping angels, these robots act like statues, stiff and lifeless up until it's too late to stop them. The security room itself is tiny and cluttered, cobwebs show under the desk, children's drawings are strewn about the walls without any explanation as to why, and despite being open on both sides, the room somehow feels isolated. Even with the doors open, the darkness outside acts like something even more oppressive than walls. The only human contact you're given in the game is bits and scraps of audio recordings from a man. This man, you learn, used to be a security guard like you, and has been so desensitized to death that his warnings to you sound like basic formalities. And even then, just as you start to get attached, even this hardened veteran is killed as you can only sit and listen, knowing that you're now on the same night that killed him. Your only human contact is taken away from you, right when you need it most. Five Nights at Freddy's 1 plays like the worst kind of a nightmare. You are helpless, trapped, losing power, and isolated. It feels ripped straight out of the head of someone raised in the 90s, with their fears of animatronics manifesting in the most terrifying way possible. And clearly, these fears connected with many people, as this small, basic indie horror game quickly became a monolithic success. Scott finally broke through. With both money and a direction, it's only natural that there would be a FNAF 2. Scott's fixation landed him a conceptual goldmine, with YouTubers, viewers, and players alike wildly speculating on the little bits and pieces of story he put into the game. It's likely that Scott didn't even expect to make another one of these, and threw in the Bite of 87 and Golden Freddy and the Phone Guy as fun little mysteries without an actual answer. However, we already know from The Desolate Hope that Scott is more than just a horror game designer, he's a storyteller too. So then, by the time Five Nights at Freddy's 2 released, Scott's view of the series had already started to shift. FNAF 2 is my favorite game in the original series. The atmosphere stays very true to the first. Much like the establishment itself, everything is bigger and better, while still being played completely straight. You could put anything in those vents and it would still be unnerving. Mechanically, the game is much more complex. They just straight up removed the doors, and in its place, Scott decided to have a much scarier setup. In order to survive, you have to let them in the office. What's fascinating is that despite the last game hiding the animatronics in shadows and obscure angles, FNAF 2 takes a very different approach. You stare them dead in the eyes. Even for the creatures you can't let in the room, like Foxy and Mangle, you still need to use your limited flashlight to ward them off. In terms of design, the animatronics are far more extreme than in the first game. While FNAF 1 relied on the uncanny of the mostly normal looking bots, Five Nights at Freddy's 2 has the withered animatronics. Subtlety is not the right word for these characters. Bonnie, Chica, Freddy, they aren't living or dead. They're walking corpses. The toy animatronics are far less scary, but almost resemble the characters in Chipper & Sons, with exaggerated faces and bright colors. The most important thing that Five Nights at Freddy's 2 does, though, is start to truly craft a storyline. For every animatronic, there's a reason they look that way. The toy animatronics are an overcorrection to make the business seem more friendly. The withered animatronics are the old ones being torn apart and retrofitted for the next location to open. And, most importantly, we're given a character that is made specifically for plot purposes, the puppet. While most animatronics are just there to be your tormentors, and even ones like Golden Freddy were likely added originally just as an Easter egg, the puppet's role in the plot is defined and specific. With this being the puppet, Scott is committing to making a story, and a brand new piece of the fandom grew wildly: the theorists. And in Scott's efforts to craft a story, the direction of the series as a whole was quickly changing. The death minigames are something that FNAF 2 and 3 share, and the message they have is important. Even though the animatronics are trying to kill you, in the story of the games, they are actually the victims. The puppet is shown as a good guy, trying to give the children murdered a new chance at life, despite the results of it being a bit less than ideal. What the difference between Five Nights at Freddy's 2 and 3 is, however, is that the antagonist of the story and the gameplay merge together. Springtrap is the villain of Five Nights at Freddy's 3. There is no one else. The gameplay itself focuses entirely around him, trying to lead him away from your office through the sounds of children, something that needs to be said out loud. While there are phantom animatronics, these are hallucinations, and ones that don't even kill you. When it comes to this game, there is just one antagonist in the game and the story. The plot is shown through minigames that show up after each night, giving clues to find the good ending of the game. This is the first, but not the last, FNAF game that claims to be the end, and this one has 3 different ones. The bad ending follows if you beat the game the normal way, going through all the nights as is and stopping at night 5. You see, after surviving each night, minigames showing the purple guy attacking and disassembling each of the animatronics in an attempt to kill off the souls inside. On night 5, we play as one of those souls and work together with the others to scare him into putting on the Springtrap suit, where it proceeds to... The neutral or secret ending plays after beating Nightmare Mode, simply showing a newspaper telling us that the attraction in FNAF 3 mysteriously burned down. We can assume this was done to try and kill off Springtrap, who's trapped inside. Success on that pending. Finally, the good ending is designed specifically for the theorist side of the community, with hidden puzzles on every night. Things like color codes and hidden pathways through minigames slowly reveal a story of trapped children. These souls stuck inside the animatronics want to be released, and through our efforts at the very end of the game, we do just that. We're shown a screen with the lights off, telling us that we finally freed the lost souls haunting this franchise. What a beautiful end to the... Five Nights at Freddy's 4 is a nightmare shitfest of horror and misery. Despite still being technically part of the original series, it takes a much larger leap into insanity. First off, the very first thing we see in the game is this little bear with a text box. Excuse me, they talk? Since when? Like, I get there's some vague instructions in the minigames and Balloon Boy laughs and all that, but this thing talks. In fact, there's a whole lot of talking in FNAF 4. Before now, we knew they were sentient and are ghosts and all that garbled nonsense, but there was always a barrier. Scott communicated messages through codes, through tiny bursts of information, just enough to get the mind rolling. We were studying moving hieroglyphs, telling tales of tragedy and suffering at the hands of this purple menace. The moment words came out of these animatronics' mouths, what the series became is far beyond horror with obscure story elements. This is now a narrative horror game. However, the gameplay and story are still separated, for now. That does not mean, however, that the gameplay is normal. FNAF 4 is a nightmare. It's in the name, obviously, but just look. People don't appreciate the insanity of this. This is Bonnie. This is Nightmare Bonnie. What? The mechanics follow you as a child in a bedroom moving around from place to place, with possibly the most terrifying game mechanic so far. Instead of the wall of darkness just occupying the space around you, you have to stare into it. And then, you need to listen ever so gently to see if the nightmare creature is right in front of you. And then, if you don't hear anything, you need to shine a flashlight to check. This is a game of Russian roulette, where the only way you know the bullet is in the chamber is if it goes. Yet, at the same time, it is still a sit and survive game, or like a move around a bit and survive. That would soon change. This far into the series, it becomes really easy to forget that Scott Cawthon is not a horror game maker, not originally. By the release of FNAF 4, Scott was 37 years old. He had been a horror game maker for less than a year at this point. The first game released on August 8th, 2014. The fourth came out on July 3rd, 2015. Despite this rampant success, this was not the career that Scott had in mind. Some part of him, deep inside, started to get an itch. It already started to show itself in the game's shift to narrative, but that wasn't enough. From the perspective of a creator, I can tell you personally that the things you're most proud of always seem to be the things that don't take off. The original Sit and Survive, The Desolate Hope, even Chipper and Sons, these were games that came from his soul. And clearly, that itch to make something true to himself was starting to take him over. And so, a game would be released on January 21st, 2016, that would show the world a side of Scott unseen since the very first game. Everyone, say hello to FNAF World. Now, I'm a bit of a weird guy for a number of reasons, but this game proves that Scott is far beyond me. In a return to form to his pre-Five Nights at Freddy's days, this game takes on the cutesy style that led directly to FNAF. The gameplay is that of a real-time RPG with a huge cast of animatronic characters that you can switch out at any time. Outside of that, the overworld of this game is massive, and the story for the most part amounts to be a teaser for the next game, Sister Location. For the most part. There's a number of endings in FNAF World, but the hard mode ending has someone very interesting as the final boss, Scott himself. Once you enter the boss room, Scott says, "That's some real dedication. Great job." Most people are content playing through the game on normal mode, but not you. There is always an overachiever in a bunch. I guess that's you. So it's your fault then, for my misery. It's never enough for you people. Don't you get it? I can't do this anymore. I won't. It was fun being the puppet master, but now I grow weary. It's time to put you in your place. Once you beat him, not an easy task, his final words to the player are, "Okay, alright, I get it. Was this the ending you really wanted, coming all the way here just to kill me? Was I really the villain in your mind? I mean, sure, this is definitely one way to bring the story to a halt, but surely there has to be a more satisfying ending. I just do what you demanded of me. I fill your insatiable gullets with more and more and more, and now you're here to show your gratitude. Well, congratulations then. I haven't brought the story to an end, you did. So feel good about yourself for ending the story by killing the storyteller." If you go to the biggest YouTube video showing off the boss fight, a top comment reads, "Just to clarify for people who don't know, this isn't how Scott feels. He admitted in a forum that it was just a joke." And truly, I did find an email where he says it was all in good fun, but, like, was it? I'm sure that he didn't actively hate the fanbase he created, but some resentment towards the series would make a lot of sense. FNAF was born out of resentment. Scott didn't see himself as a horror game maker until one day he was. And considering just how radical the shift in the series is from here on out, it's clear that he wasn't content being just the horror game guy, giving us hints from the shadows. No, Scott's a storyteller. He told us that himself. It's time for him to tell us a story. Sister Location is my favorite Five Nights at Freddy's game. Fresh off the release of Scott's first journey into book writing, The Silver Eyes, he came into Sister Location determined. While the fanbase wasn't sure just what this game was going to be, Scott kills any doubts in the very first minute.
She can dance. She can sing. She's equipped with a built-in helium tank for inflating balloons right at her fingertips. She can take song requests. She can even dispense ice cream.
With all due respect, those aren't the design choices we were curious about, Mr. Afton.
This is not the original series. Five Nights at Freddy's sister location is a story-driven game. You play as a nighttime technician whose job it is to repair all the various funtime animatronics. You're led around from room to room by an AI, with different, more and more terrifying jobs every night. However, on the second night, you meet the life and soul of the game.
I don't recognize you. You are new. I remember this scenario, however. It's a strange thing to want to do, to come here. I'm curious what events would lead a person to want to spend their nights in a place like this.
Baby is an animatronic who speaks. Not in text, she speaks to your ears. In fact, there's a lot of speaking in this game. There's barely a moment where something isn't talking. Baby's voice is innocent and wistful, but soulless and robotic. Hand Unit's voice is cheerfully corporate, Freddy's voice is psychotic, Afton's is deep and intimidating. These gaps we had to fill, the life that all of our collective minds brought to these characters, these animatronics, these villains, these victims, are given a concrete reality. They have personality, motives, intentions, emotions, and it's all done amazingly. Sister Location is effectively terrifying. Not only does Baby's voice fill me with dread, but Scott didn't completely abandon the roots of the series. While you move around the facility, every night is capped off with a unique sit and survive minigame. My personal favorite is Funtime Freddy's. Like the plush trap minigame in FNAF 4, you're playing chicken with a killer robot trying to restart a number of systems. The real key to the terror, though, is the constantly strobing light that only gives you small glimpses at Freddy as he slowly inches towards you. It reminds me a lot of the first game and the camera blackouts, but a lot faster and far more intense. And yet, between the crawling through vents and the pitch black hallways, the chilling voices and insane storyline, the glue that holds it all together is the humor. Scott's sense of humor, fittingly, is just as strange as he is. We see throughout the series Scott take jabs at the Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria Corporation. While you'd think that the animatronics are the soulless murderers, we come to find out that corporate indifference and greed are the things really killing off all these kids. While William Afton and co. are behind the souls of the children being trapped, the pure, stubborn desire for money is the thing that keeps fueling the reincarnation of all of these massacres. It's a theme we see play out through the entire series, and that corporate indifference is the subject of most of Scott's jokes. Considering his long career as an independent developer, we can assume that a lot of this humor and malice towards big companies comes from deep inside of Scott. Sister Location made a big splash, with the story causing chaos for theorists and the gameplay being an encapsulating fresh start, but Scott was not done yet. The next game, Pizzeria Simulator, didn't skip a beat on the path to Security Breach. Stepping away from the immersive underground bunker of Sister Location, FNAF 6 is a very meta game. You play as a Freddy Fazbear franchisee, running a location that you get to upgrade and explore. Corporate humor is taken to the absolute extreme, with you needing to balance profit with safety, dodging lawsuits and factoring in injuries and death as a mere cost of doing business. While there are sit and survive segments after each day, it's possible to play the entire game without a single animatronic coming to kill you. You're given a choice to examine the bots as a tape recording tests them, asking you to use a taser if they start to move. Something familiar. If you fail during the interview, you don't die like in the other games. The animatronics instead hide in your vents, tormenting you throughout the night. The contrast between the simulator and the after-hours sides of the game gives us a very literal clash between the old and the new. On one, you have the pitch black, atmospheric foundation of the series. On the other, we see the absurd, colorful, story-driven future. But that future, what we see as where FNAF is going, is truly a journey into the past. Let's go back for a second, all the way back to 2014, to the video Sit and Survive gameplay. I mentioned it a couple times, but this game is more than meets the eye. Chipper & Sons might have been the straw that broke the camel's back, but this game is Five Nights at Freddy's. Just look at it. We see the DNA of Sit and Survive in every installment, in every door that needs closing, in every death minigame, in the sound effects, in the style. What Pizzeria Simulator is, really, is the original game split in two. FNAF 6 is the third game in the series to claim that it's the end, but this time I honestly believe that it's true. The Lore Keeper ending and the completion ending tied up a lot of loose ends, but the most important to me is the puppet. It was the first character introduced in the series intentionally as something more than just an animatronic, the first real mystery that was started with FNAF 2. We finally see the puppet, then the security puppet, being there for the original killing. It was tasked with protecting the very first murder victim, but was trapped in its box. It couldn't stop William. We see it run out into the rain, desperately searching until it finds the girl in the back alley. All it can do is curl around her, as her own soul leaps into it, setting off the rest of the series. Every FNAF game, as it bounced further into the future of the series, kept looking back. We would see, again and again, the real story behind those very first incidents, the bite, the murders, giving gifts, and giving life. But FNAF 4 goes all the way back. Before Freddy, before even FNAF 1, and I truly think it's the last to do so. Ultimate Custom Night feels like an after-story, one last hurrah to the series. Being the 7th main game, just like the 7th day in the originals, it serves as a custom night to all of the games. We have the deadly serious Freddy Fazbear next to Mr. Hippo and Music Man. While FNAF 6 felt like a close to the story of the original series, Ultimate Custom Night feels like a close to the gameplay. The tradition of the near impossibly hard 2020 mode was present in every single game except for Pizzeria Simulator. Even in Sister Location, you not only had the secret ending, but an additional custom mode added just to keep that tradition going. So, to make up for that absence, Scott gave the world his hardest challenge yet. Just like the first game, he had no idea if it was even possible to beat. 50/20 mode not only involved 50 characters, but had even more secret animatronics thrown into the mix in the middle of the nights. And, just like with the first game, it was beaten, not even 2 weeks later.
Oh my god! Oh! Oh! Holy shit!
With that achievement, Five Nights at Freddy's as we knew it was over. Help Wanted came out around a year later as a fully fledged VR game. It served as a bridge, connecting the old games with a new way to experience them. With the story too, Help Wanted recontextualized everything we've come to know and set up everything after. The video games that we all played and we all watched exist in the same universe as this game. Turns out, the Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria Corporation contracted an indie dev to create everything in order to hide and profit off of the real tragedies that took place. This universe, funnily enough, is on the same sort of layer as ours now. People in this world played those games just like we did. They dug into the lore, made music for it, watched Let's Players scream their lungs out at it, the only difference being that the corporation is real. In this world, the animatronic craze never died, and got far more advanced than our world could ever wish for it to be. This is the world that Security Breach takes place in. Rather than the tiny, rinky-dink establishments we came to know, the corporation in this world is insanely rich enough to fund the Pizzaplex and give to us the most advanced animatronics yet. Fully sentient, fully conscious, and fully animated. I did not grow up in the 1990s. I did not live through the animatronic craze. Scott did. He carried on all of those memories, all of his memories from the 90s, and put it into his work. He tried his hardest making retro video games with his retro style and retro tastes until one day he twisted it. He took those memories, not of the pleasant animatronics, the ones that lived in the minds of children, but something bastardized. Dark, uncanny monsters, and that terror is what gave him success. And yet, as the series kept going, he started to put his soul into the story. A story of family, a story of soulless corporations and the monsters secretly being the victims. Of children being killed, trapped eternally in metal bodies and plastic skin. Stuck, frozen in time in an aging world, being tossed aside like scrap while everyone else carried on uncaring. Tragedy after tragedy. Yet, these games started a new animatronic craze. Even under the shroud of this dark story, people saw the souls inside of these robots. Communities formed to celebrate them, make stories about them, give them personalities and voices before Scott ever did. The passion ignited a new side of FNAF, one that was born with help wanted. In this new universe, the one Scott made for us, something different happened. Despite all of its flaws and shortcomings, Scott made something that our world couldn't. He did what nobody else has ever done, what Chuck E. Cheese couldn't have even dreamed of. He did what millions of 90s kids did in their hearts and minds. He took these animatronics, these uncanny, cold, soulless chunks of metal and machinery, and he gave them life. Personally, I think that counts for something. I really want to make more stuff like this in the future, but if I'm gonna do that, it would help tremendously if you subscribe to me and subscribe to my Patreon. The topics I cover on my channel are not always designed for the YouTube algorithm, but it's things I think people like you will truly enjoy. If you made it this far into the video, I think that's more than evidence enough. For just $2 per video, you get access to everything while making it easier for me to do things like this more often. You get to message me directly on Patreon, you get a role with custom colors on my Discord, and have your name in the credits of every video I make. Higher tier patrons even get their names shouted out. Special thanks to Jared Cho, Zimborg, and Tommy the Cat for the Patreon donations. Also, as I said, I have a Discord that's pretty fun to be in if you want to join. All links in the description. With the e-begging out of the way, this is the end of the video. I hope to see you all next time.